Good morning, Dr. Paul. After reading Thomas Wood's book, Meltdown, I recently had a conversation with my father, who is an old-school Republican, although he's very disenchanted with the party right now. He also used to teach economics at the college level. And when I proposed to him the idea of going back to a gold standard, first of all, he holds two paradigms. One, we need a Federal Reserve as the lender of last resort, and two, we don't need to go back to the gold standard. His main argument, though, was that if we go back to a gold standard, and this is what I'd like you to address, the money multiplier effect, that is through normal saving and lending by banks, not what the Federal Reserve is doing right now, becomes very limited under a gold standard as opposed to paper money.
He's concerned about if we had a gold standard, there would not be a money multiplier. Of course, the money multiplier is the inflation, so that would be good. You wouldn't have the malinvestment, you wouldn't have the excessive debt, you wouldn't have trillions of dollars worth of future obligation because the attitude would change. But economic growth wouldn't seize up. I mean, we had tremendous economic growth in the latter part of the 19th century. And we didn't have the money multiplier. But we have to understand basic capitalism and the way the market system works. And that is, if we're working and we earn $100 and we live on $50, we have $50 of true wealth as long as it's measurable in something sound, not paper that loses value. So if you can save half of what you earn, that is capital. That means you can reinvest it or let somebody else invest it, and then there's economic growth. The economic growth would be slower than in boom times, but you would prevent the necessary bust that has to happen. So yes, there wouldn't have been under a system where you could only build a house when people put money in their, committed it into a savings and loan, and you built a house. Yes, there would be less houses. But because we were selling houses and the prices were going up, and that was pyramiding. Oh yes, my house is going to be 100 and buy it for 100. It's going to be 120 next year. I'm going to borrow 120, and they were doing this. You wouldn't have that. So the things that you'd argue, in favor of this pyramiding of debt and this borrowing and the expansion of the money supply through fractional reserve banking, it wouldn't happen. But that's what we want to stop. We want a steady growth. We want people who are qualified to buy houses, because it doesn't work. It might help temporarily. You can have community reinvestment acts and inflation and cause the boom, but guess who loses their houses first? They lose their jobs, they lose their house, and the prices keep going up. So it doesn't serve their interest. So in the very narrow sense, the argument you make is plausible, but that doesn't justify it, because it's only temporary, and the consequences are so serious, and that's why you don't want it.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. My question is on health freedom. At the end of the year, the United States is supposed to come in compliance with the Codex.
Get a little closer to the mic.
Okay. The United States is supposed to come in compliance with the Codex on nutritional health that's supposed to be regulated throughout the globalist thing. I was just wondering if you could comment on that, because I called my reps and they have no comment on it. So.
Okay, he's talking about the regulation of nutritional products under Codex, vitamins, and that's where the regulations will become international. Everything's moving toward international controls. There's nothing wrong with free trade and internationalism, free trade, free movement, and even international currency, as long as it's a commodity like gold. But this is typical of the movement, not only in monetary policy, but in the area of nutritional products. So they want the regulations to be put under the WTO. And once again, I believe that's all motivated by the drug companies. They don't want competition. They want to control it, and that's why I take a very firm position. I don't like the sacrifice of any of our sovereignty, and therefore, not only would I challenge the WTO in regulating your access to nutritional products, I'd probably just get rid of the whole bunch, the United Nations and the IMF and the World Bank. I can't quite hear that.
Sorry. You had said that you don't quite believe that the Congress should control the money supply. So My question is, should it be controlled in some fashion, and if so, by whom?
Yes, he was asking that since I said I don't want the Congress to control the money supply, who should? And my answer is the market. Milton Friedman and I were friends, and we debated the monetary issue, and he would always concede to me that my gold standard wasn't all that bad because it was he used the words honest-to-God gold standard, but he said that he didn't endorse that because the gold standard has always been abused by individuals, and they would go off the gold standard. But what did he come up with? He came up with the idea that we didn't need a Federal Reserve, we needed a computer, and the computer would increase the supply of money 3% a year. Well, he probably got that number from the fact that under a free market standard and gold, the gold supply worldwide has generally increased between 2 and 3% per year. And even if it didn't increase, the supply of gold always serves its purpose because the price, as long as prices are freely adjustable, prices will go down. And you can have a tremendous expansion of purchasing power if a loaf of bread costs a dime instead of $2. You know, there's a lot of purchasing power there. But under a free market, the money supply is increased by market forces. If the purchasing power of gold goes up, there's a greater incentive to mine gold, and that gold would come into the market not by the central bank passing out to favored banks and corporations and government officials. It would comes into the market by the people who had to work and mine the gold. So it's a more natural way, but it wouldn't be dictated by the Congress or a central bank.
Good morning, Congressman. I'm a registered nurse and I work for one of the major insurance companies. I work mainly with Medicare and Medicaid customers. My question is this, that you address that one of the main reasons to control the Federal Reserve is and their function, to keep in check inflation. Medicare recipients received word from the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services that they would not receive a cost of living check. And I think a lot of Medicare recipients were a little concerned. Do you have any thoughts on that? And as a follow-up, with Obama's healthcare reform proposal, it is suggested they will cut into Medicare benefits. How do you see that to ultimately affect us baby boomers when that does come into fruition, if it does?
You know, she talks about the cost of living increases aren't going to be given to Social Security, and they're starting to pinch pennies with Medicare and Medicaid, which they have to, but because, you know, we're going broke. But it's sort of ironic that they have no hesitation to pass out trillions of dollars by the Federal Reserve to their friends and hundreds of billions of dollars of TARP funds that we have no transparency of, and we don't know where this money goes. But now they're nickel and diming, you know, the recipients of a program. Now the transition, my position has always been not to go after the people who have become dependent on government medical care. Just because of the politics of it all. It doesn't work very well. But I don't know whether they do that for symbolism or think they're going to save enough money, because the amount of money they're going to save is minor compared to these big dollars. I mean, why don't we talk about cutting about 50% or 80% out of the military-industrial complex first before we do that? Thank you.
Good morning. My question is, let's say the Federal Reserve is finally ended and we're looking to implement a new system. The Congress, how much faith would you have in Congress not implementing a more disastrous system, or even worse yet, a global currency? And what would your thoughts be on combating that?
Yeah. He said, if we audit the Fed and we get rid of the Fed, what should the concern be about the Congress making it much worse, or a international central bank making much things worse? That's obviously should be a concern.